The idea of multitasking is so mainstream that some companies actually write it in the job description when they're looking for candidates. Multitasking is generally considered to be actually quite a reasonable skill to expect of others and to expect of yourself. And I thought so too. In fact, I've always been secretly, or not so secretly, envious of multitaskers because it seems like such a helpful thing to be able to do two things at the same time. Until I read a really good book called The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And in the book, the authors outlined the disadvantages of multitasking, and they certainly convinced me. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Karen, I'm a clinical psychologist, and it's my mission to share everything I know to make therapy and psychotherapy and mental health more accessible to anyone who can use it. I want to bring understanding about mental health into everyone's home so that you can use it to make the small or big changes to enable you to live your life to the full. In this video, I want to talk about where the whole idea of multitasking came from. Then I want to briefly examine the research into this concept and what the research actually says. I'm going to explain why, as human beings, we find the idea of multitasking so attractive. And then I'm going to convince you to stop doing it by explaining all the disadvantages of multitasking. Finally, I'm going to share with you 5 helpful tips about how to stop multitasking once and for all. So the idea of multitasking has its roots in the Industrial Revolution, when there was a global movement towards more and more efficiency and production lines, where the worker who could do more than one thing at the same time, or who could do multiple things in a short time, was seen as more useful and was more productive, and thus more valuable to the company owner. But the actual term multitasking was coined only in the 1960s and originally related to a computer's ability to do multiple tasks seemingly at the same time using a single resource, which was, I think it's called the CPU. But this term, the term multitasking, is highly misleading because even a computer does not do multiple tasks at the same time. A computer processes one task at a time. It just switches between tasks very, very quickly. So it seems as if the tasks are being performed simultaneously. Your brain works in exactly the same way, but it is not as speedy. You also switch from task to task quickly rather than do 2 tasks at the same time. And unfortunately, you are not as efficient as a computer. So what does the research say? In actual fact, this concept has been researched a lot, and the outcome is very clear. Multitasking is pretty much an illusion. A professor at Stanford University by the name of Clifford Nass did some groundbreaking research into this idea of multitasking because he himself was envious of multitaskers and wanted to find out how exactly they managed to do it because he couldn't. Instead of finding out how multitaskers multitasked, he was shocked to find out that multitaskers were actually not very effective or very efficient as people who were unable to multitask. The people who thought they were good at multitasking actually turned out to be overall more ineffective at every task they tried to do. So basically the outcome of the research is pretty clear. If you try to multitask, you'll end up doing a less excellent job at each task you try. It will take more time and it will cause you more stress. If you're enjoying this video, Please click the like and subscribe buttons and turn on the notification bell. It's super helpful and supports me in making videos on this channel. According to Keller, our brains have different channels which handle different activities. So although we can process certain activities at the same time, we can only do so as long as each activity stays in its own channel. A lot of physical activities don't actually require much focus at all, either because they are accomplished by a completely different part of our brain, like breathing or blinking, or because we do them almost on autopilot, like walking. So although we can do more than one thing at the same time, we cannot focus on more than one thing at the same time. One way you can look at it is to imagine your brain as a pizza. So you can give away some slices of the pizza to a different task, but the main task is going to have less. And if you divide that pizza amongst too many tasks, everyone is going to end up hungry. It's fine to give different slices of your attention to different activities when the activities are things like walking and listening to a podcast, or watching TV while you fold some laundry, or do some other kind of fairly simple task. But as soon as something that requires focus comes up, it can actually be dangerous. For example, if you're chatting on the phone while you're walking and suddenly you have to cross a very busy and dangerous intersection, then you should actually get off the phone. We all understand this perfectly well when we think of the air traffic controller, the pilot, the surgeon, or even the therapist or the dentist. How would you feel if your therapist was checking their phone and texting in session with you? Or if your dentist was listening to a podcast or singing along to some music while he was drilling into your tooth? You probably wouldn't feel very comfortable at all. And that would be completely understandable. So we all have this understanding that certain tasks do require 100% focus, and we expect that 100% focus of people who do those jobs. So why do we even try to multitask if our brains are really not good at actually doing it? Firstly, it's because as a society, we feel like we have too much to do and too little time. The modern human is seen as a multitasker, and the disadvantages of multitasking are not generally known or discussed. Our lives are full of distractions, and with the advent of the smartphone, we have numerous demands on our attention coming through constantly to distract us. Because we feel like we have too much to do in too little time, we try to do more than one thing at once in order to try and save time or to be more efficient. So we check our phone while we're talking to someone else. We have notifications coming in constantly onto our computers and onto our smartphones, even while we're in meetings. As we work, we answer calls, send texts, update social media, and try to do multiple things at once while piles of work, unfinished work, grow around us. And this is normal. Most people do this, or at least try to do this, at least to some extent. When last did you sit down with your family or a group of friends and have the complete and undivided attention of everybody present? Another reason that we're attracted to and attempt to do multitasking is because it provides a little dopamine hit. Switching tasks gives us a little dopamine hit that rewards and reinforces this behavior. So what happens is that if you multitask over a period of time, you may tend to become bored if you don't constantly switch tasks or do different things. So let's talk about the disadvantages of multitasking. Firstly, multitasking is actually irresponsible, particularly if you're driving. I think that everybody knows that texting and driving is not safe, and in fact, in most countries, it's illegal. But how many of us still attempt to, for example, use Google Maps while we're driving? Or talk on the phone while we're driving? We may not hold the phone in our hands, we may use the hands-free, but that doesn't mean that we are able to give our full attention to the task of driving, which makes it dangerous. The second disadvantage of multitasking is that it actually distorts time. People who multitask have a disproportional idea of how long things actually take. You don't know how long something actually takes because you never focus on just one thing. You're always doing more than one thing at a time, which means that things take much longer than you realize and much longer than they should. Multitasking leads to poor decisions. Research shows that people who multitask or who think they're good at multitasking tend to value new information over old information, even if the new information isn't as good. Fourthly, it damages your productivity overall. People who multitask tend to be less productive than people who don't attempt to multitask. In fact, the research says that your productivity decreases by 40%. That is a huge drop in productivity. Isn't it ironic that people who are multitasking are trying to improve their productivity, but in reality, they are destroying their productivity? According to the research, the fifth danger or disadvantage of multitasking is that it actually damages your ability to focus on any one thing for a sustained period of time. You become less able to focus on one thing over time if you have been multitasking or trying to multitask for any period of time. So if you spend an hour multitasking and then try to block off an hour to focus, your focus will be damaged. You will be less able to focus than you would have been had you not attempted to multitask in the previous hour. And this effect is compounded over time. The sixth, and probably to me the most important disadvantage of multitasking, is that it damages your mental health. When you attempt to multitask all the time, you are constantly distracted and easily overwhelmed. This leads to unnecessary stress and makes you way more prone to burning out. The other way that it damages your mental health is by damaging your relationships. If you have ever tried to have a serious conversation with someone while they constantly look at their phone or send a text while you're talking about something that's really important to you, then you'll understand why it is damaging to relationships. And of course, our relationships, our social connections are part of the foundation of our well-being and happiness. So anything that damages your relationships damages you. Lastly, I want to talk about how you can overcome the dangers and disadvantages of multitasking if you have been a multitasker and you have now come to the realization that you need to stop. Tip number one is make the decision to stop multitasking. Realize, acknowledge that this is bad for you. It hurts you and it hurts the people around you. So make the decision to stop. Thanks to neuroplasticity, it's not going to take you very, very long to rewire your brain so that you no longer experience these negative effects of attempting to multitask over time. Tip number two, sit down with some time and pen and paper and work out what really matters to you in each aspect of your life. This is a super useful exercise, and if you'd like some guidance as to how to do that, then please have a look at my video, which I will link to in the description below, in which I talk about the book The One Thing, and I give my thoughts about how you can apply this to your own life. Tip number three is create the habit of focusing on one thing at a time by planning for it. Plan your month, your week, and your day in advance so that you are ready to focus on your one thing in each area of your life, because each area of your life deserves your respect. Your health and your well-being deserves your attention and your respect. Your work deserves your respect. Your family deserves your respect. Plan for activities that support those areas of your life and put them in your calendar. Tip number 4 is block out time. Block out realistic and reasonable blocks of time where you will focus purely on the thing that you've allocated time for in your calendar according to your plan. Tip number 5, don't let anything distract you. Focus. Andrew Huberman in Huberman Lab has a whole bunch of tips and techniques for improving focus and concentration, and if you'd like to have a look at those, then head over to Huberman Lab and check it out. But the thing that I find the most useful in terms of maintaining focus is simply to put myself in a space where I won't be interrupted, to close the door, switch off my phone, and just give my full attention to the thing that I'm doing at the time. It is the planning of the time and the blocking of the time that helps you to actually use the time to focus as you intended to. If this video was helpful to you, then please let me know in the comments. And if you have any question about anything that I've said, or any question in general that you would like me to answer, then please let me know, and I'll make a video about your question. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back here.